This is assignment number 9. In assignment number 9, we're going to look at importing and exporting files. In a communication system, most of the commands would be sent through a file that would then be converted. And so to first do that, you would need to open up the file, read the file, and then a lot of times you have sensors or other information that is stored that is going to be transmitted back. And so again, it's going to be saved and stored in files. So that is the goal of this assignment to do that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is going to open up assignment number 8. So that was the com_func. So I'm going to open that up. I'm going to rename it to com_io, and I'm going to save it now as a different file. So the next step is to copy and paste. You're going to now create a new function, and this function is going to read the input string from this file in comstring.txt. So I'm going to now replace this command string that actually creates that, and now I'm going to read it from a file instead. So again, it will still have one command per row, but this is going to read it from a file. So down below, we're going to create this function. So I'm going to copy and paste this at the end of my file again. So again, to do the function, I'm going to do the function and then return. And what this function is going to do, it's going to read strings from a file, which will have the name, file name. In this, it's going to be called in comstring.txt. It will have one string per row of file, and the strings in the file are ASCII with no quote marks. It's going to store results in a character matrix, which will be the output of this function. The first step in being able to do this is that you want to open this file name file, and then you want to be able to extract out of it each row into an array, which will be the command _string._matrix. So to open a file, you want to open it, you can open it in different modes. So we want to open it as a text file in the read mode so that we can read it. There's also a write mode, and there's also different types of files that you can open. So fopen is the command to open a file. It's going to be file name, and we want to open it, as you can see here, the syntax is to have the file name and then permission of what you want to open it with. So we want R for read, W is for write, T is text, and then an end single quote. And so what this is going to do is it returns two things. It's going to return what is called a file ID and a message. The message will be if you have any errors, and if not, it won't return anything in the message. So file ID now will be what you will use to access where the location of file name is stored on your hard drive. So you always have to use a pointer, which is this file _ID now, to point to the location on the hard drive where the information for the file name is stored. So we then want to check to see if there are any errors in opening. So to do that, if your file ID is less than 0, then you will have had a message. If it's greater than 0, that is going to be a number that will be a location again on your hard drive. So this is how you'll have the syntax to check for an error when opening the file. So now we want to read the file itself one line at a time. And so we want to then store each line in the command matrix. So we can do a loop to do this. So we want to read the file one line at a time. We're going to store the information in this command underscore string underscore matrix, and assume that we don't know exactly how long the file is going to be. And this is very typical. So if we don't know how long the file is actually going to be, there's another type of loop which is called a while loop. And the most common way to use a while loop is to set some variable, in this case I'm calling it A, to 1, and then when I reach the end of the file I'm going to set A to 0, and then that will exit out of my while loop. So just like the for loop, the while loop, you need to use the end command. And so we're going to read a line from the file at a time. So I need to get a line from the file. So there is a file function called fgetL, and this will get a line, and I do the file ID, and this will put in one line into this variable called line. Then I need to check for the end of file. If it's not a string, then I want to set A to 0. So this is another function, is string, and I can check and see if it's a string. If it's not, that means it will be the end of the file, and I'll exit out of the loop by setting the variable that the while loop has to a different number. So if it is a line that, or if it is not the end of the file, if it is not the end of the line, I want to extract the string from it. So I'm going to use a temporary variable, and I can do this a few different ways. I've opted to use the scan function again. So I am now going to leave it up to you. Right now you have the string from the line is stored now in this temporary variable called com_str. I'm going to leave it up to you to be able to finish the rest of this, where you want to put in this command _str_matrix, you want to append onto it now this new line as a separate line, so in a vertical form, and I'll let you finish that. Now I'm going to end the while loop, so end. And before I return out of this function, I need to make sure that I close the file ID. If not, you can get errors by having it still open. So this finishes the function for reading from the file. Now that I've finished writing the function for reading the file, I want to create this incomstring.txt. So I'm going to open an editor. In this case I've opened Notebook. I'm going to copy the strings, so then I save this in a location that I know where it is as incomstring. Now I want to save and load or import and export files. So one is to open, fopen and fclose. There's another way that we're going to practice right now, and so you want to do this after you've created the code words and the command code. You want to place this in. What we want to do is practice input and output functions. One way to do this is using what is called the save command. So what you're going to do is write the command code into a file, and so to do that you use save, and the format is to have the file name where you want it to be saved, which is here. If you don't use a variable name, you need to put it into single quotes. If you actually use a variable name, then you don't need to have it in single quotes. So before, when we did the function, we used the word file name, which was a variable, and so we didn't have to put single quotes around it. Here again, you put the single quotes of whatever variable. And what this is going to do is save it in xmit underscore code underscore bit. Then you're going to clear the command code. The format for load is very similar. So again, you just have xmit underscore code underscore bits and then command code. So then we want to print command code to make sure that it is the same. So now I want to use a different function to do the same thing. It's called DLM write and DLM read. So we're going to do this with command receive. So this time we're going to save the transmitted bits in a file. This is a different way of doing it. So there are two ways of doing the same thing. This time we're going to use what's called DLM write. A lot of times you want to actually separate the information by either periods, commas, any other space. This is the way you would do it, is with DLM write and read. So DLM write, again, you type in the name of the file, and this time it does not have an automatic extension, so I have to put on the .txt for whatever type of file I want to create, and then the array that I want to store in there, and this time it's going to separate out everything in terms of a comma. So again, I want to erase this, and now I'm going to read in using DLM read. So this is the syntax. It's slightly different in that the DLM read just has the inputs of the name of the file and the delimiter, and I have to place it into the array, so you have to put an equal sign in between there. Okay, the last thing I want to do is now create a function to write the file. So I'm going to copy and paste this function call. So I'm going to place this function call right after the com string receive. Because MAtlab is case sensitive, I need to make sure that I replace this in all capitals with the lower case so that it will be able to see the right variable. And at the bottom I'm going to copy and paste the function itself. And I'm going to create now this new function which is going to write the file. And the file should look exactly the same. It should have the right 0, right 1, left 1, right 0. So again, to do this, I want to use the file open. And this time I'm going to write the text, so I use a W instead. And it has the same two file ID and message. And again, I can check and see if there was an error. So now I want to print out the rows into the file instead. So I want to do this for the size of the str matrix that's coming in. So I can do a loop, and I want to do it for as many rows that there are in there. So it would be the size of how many rows, and then it's a comma 1 for just one column. And I can use printf. And the way to do this with a file is it's fprintf, and you use the file ID first, and then I want to have it as the string, and then a \n is for a new line. So this would be the syntax for printing it. And again, I want to close the file ID and make sure I have my return. So now I want to run this script, so I'm going to have com_io, and I see that I get an error here. I've left this error in to show you a common mistake, and that is that when you have the while loop, you want to make sure that this is a comparison statement. So therefore, to compare A to B1, you need to have two equal signs. So I'm going to save it and I'm going to run it again. So after running this com_io function script, I want to check and verify that it is working correctly. As I go through here, the first thing I should see is a file_id. Then I should see that it is getting each line and appending it into the command_str_matrix. So I go down and verify that that is looking correct. So here I see that it did get the command_str is correct. Then it should do what it did before. So here I should see that once I get to where I have all of the command code, which should be the 1 through 48, that I do set it to be empty, and this was where it was doing the save and load, and that it comes back and my command code should look like it did before, which it does. I also want to check that the DLM files, reading and writing, worked. So that was in my command receive. So once I have the command receive, I want to make sure it gets set to empty and then that it does load it in again correctly, as I see here that it does. So the rest of this should look like it did before. The only difference is, again, at the end I should have this file ID to verify that it is actually opening a new file to write. And then I also want to check, I can use Notepad or WordPad, and I want to check that these do look very similar, as I see here, in com string, out com string. And then I notice in this one, this is where it delimited each of them by a comma. So this was when I loaded in this data. So I want to look at each of those and verify that they do look correct. And then I'm going to email the files, email the diary file along with this com_io file, and you've completed this assignment.